Hi, I'm Mauricio Schulering and you're listening to The Schulering Hub, a podcast gathering hospitality professionals from around the world to talk about what hospitality is and what isn't, and their lives, the innovations, and the ideas that set some businesses apart and others not. We also talk about the future, the trends, and recently we embarked on a journey to search for happiness in hospitality. What makes hospitality a happy place? What are the hurdles that block happiness from happening? And what can we do to overcome them? I invite you to be part of this journey. We make this for you, so I hope you enjoy it.
We're 15 years into Airbnb being around, and it's gone from, like you said, an air mattress on the ground and a hot plate in the kitchen and a shared bathroom to what you see today, which is really what we focus on, building these magnificent resort style properties. And I call it the amenities arms race. And it is basically, we started there with an air mattress on the ground, and where we are today is so much different. And where we're going, where the short-term rental industry will be in another 15 or 20 years is very different too.
This is Mark Lumpkin from STR Cribs. Today we're doing something different, exploring the short-term rentals world, which is mostly known by the platform Airbnb, that just before the pandemic was freaking out hoteliers from around the world.
Is short-term rentals hospitality or is tourism?
I would say it's 100% hospitality. And I think that has actually been the industry's kind of Achilles heel over the last couple of years, is that there are many investors who don't think of it as hospitality. They think of it as I'm renting out my property. No, you're in the hospitality industry, and this is not a traditional rental. And so that probably mindset has given the industry a little bit of a bad name.
Besides telling us entertaining stories about his experiences as a cannabis B2B salesman, we discussed the short-term rentals history, successful strategies and business models, and what the future holds for short-term rentals. Before jumping to our conversation though, if you're listening to our chat on Spotify, please answer our question box today. Is short-term rentals hospitality? Now sit, relax, and enjoy the chat.
Hello, Schiller, and welcome to another episode of the Schulering Hub podcast talking hospitality. And today we are discussing STRs, short-term rentals, a little bit different than we normally discuss here about the hospitality and service, but I'm really curious to know how we can actually make that a big business or a small business, or can we compare that to hotels, and is STR hospitality? That's a question I will ask. For this, I got Mark Lumpkin to talk to me from STR Cribs. Mark, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to talk to you about the world of short-term rentals and look forward to this.
Yeah, that's going to be a super interesting conversation, Mark, because normally we have in our show people talking about hospitality, about service, and how we can improve the experience of hospitality. And it's really interesting what you sent to me before we have this chat. So I have a lot to talk to you, to digest and learn. But before that, as our audience know, humans come first in the Schulering Hub. So who is Mark?
Yeah, so I'm a Florida resident. I am a father. I have 2 little girls and obviously a husband. I'm a world traveler. I've been to about 40 countries. And me and my wife at the end of this summer are going to have all the 50 states checked off our box. We only have a couple more to go. And so we love to travel. And actually the reason that I fell into the hospitality industry is because of our love of traveling. And we were doing so much traveling, visiting so many places. I felt like I was learning so much about what I liked and what I didn't like as a guest, and things that were working and weren't working firsthand. And so we decided to take that knowledge and implement it into a business plan and help property owners really improve their properties. And so, yeah, I love to travel. I've got a family. We're right at the beach here in Florida. And so we like to spend a lot of time at the beach and do a lot of outside stuff.
Got me. I love the beach. I miss the beach. I lived in Sydney for about 10 years and I miss the beach side in Prague. Of course, we are landlocked here. So I envy you for that, Mark. I envy you for that. But let's get a little bit about you. I saw that you, before engaging on the STR world, you work as a B2B sales, right? And one point that I found really interesting that you work as B2B sales for the cannabis industry, and where you were like between the streets and the producers for part of the B2B.
Yeah, man, that's a great question. And honestly, it's a wild story. In a lot of parts of the world and a lot of parts of the country, I would be in prison for the rest of my life for some things that I've done and the amount of cannabis weed that I've sold. I got approached. I want to say this was in like maybe 2013 or 14 from a friend who wanted to start growing marijuana legally, as it had just become legal recreationally in our state. And he'd always grown it illegally and maybe done it really in small quantities, just a couple plants here or there, sold to friends and family. And it was a brand new frontier. It had become state legal, and he went and got 4 licenses, opened up 4 farms, and was growing somewhere between about 20 to 30,000 pounds of cannabis every single year.
Wow.
And what's interesting about the state that I worked in is that you could only have certain licenses. So one guy could grow the product, one guy could move the product to a dispensary, and only a dispensary could legally sell it to the end user. And so just because you owned a farm doesn't mean that you could actually sell your product to people on the streets. You had to go through a licensed vendor. And so I had come in with some of my sales experience and help him build the sales network to get his product from the farms into the dispensaries all across the state. And my favorite story, I've got some pictures, is we sold 10,000 pounds in one go to a chain of stores, and we delivered it to their wholesale warehouse. And we were throwing this stuff in trash bags, you know, those big 50-gallon trash bags. You get it like the home improvement store, the big black trash bags. We had those filled, and we were just filling this big U-Haul storage moving truck full. And I drove this up the interstate 3 hours, and I felt like Pablo Escobar. I was like, I just moved 10,000 pounds of weed, and it was totally legal. So it was quite an experience. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Like when I read that, I was like, wow, I have to bring this up because this is something that is really, really interesting. But then, of course, you worked in real estate, in the auto industry, and then you get to the short-term rental. So for our audience, because like we normally speak to hospitality people, and there is a little bit of a beef between hospitality, hotel industry, and the STR. So can you explain first, what is the STR business model?
Okay, so it would be taking any space, whether it's an apartment, a house, a yurt in your backyard, whatever space that you think is suitable for someone to rent and stay on a night-by-night basis. Most of the time it's done by individual, everyday, what we call mom and pop owners. And so me and my wife have a second condo, you know, in the mountains that we don't use year round. And so we put that up for rent when we're not using it, or we bought another property that's not our primary address and we want to turn that into a rental. I think of it like just the availability for everyone to own a small hotel and handle guests. And that's really what you're doing. You're opening up a mini hotel, whether you have 1 unit or 10 units. And so that's the short-term rental industry. And you find your guests through a lot of popular online platforms like Airbnb and VRBO, where people book directly with you. You do all the communication, the platform collects the money, you handle check-in, check-out. And so it allows everyday folks to own a small hotel.
Can I ask one thing then? Who created who? Short-term rentals create Airbnb, or Airbnb created the short-term rentals industry?
That is a great question. Obviously the short-term rental industry has been around far before Airbnb. I think they started in 2008, but it was mostly in the form of like bed and breakfasts, or you go to a cabin destination in like Tennessee or in the Smoky Mountains, and there is a company that might have some density and a dozen cabins, and you can rent one for a couple of nights. What Airbnb really did was take those small, localized industries and open it up to the entire country and give everyone access to these properties that they might not have been able to find otherwise. Because if you were traveling in 2005, your only option was a hotel. And it was very hard to find these alternatives to where you can stay. And Airbnb kind of poured gas. They opened the floodgates for all of us to be successful and to rent out our properties to people from all around the world.
Yes, I was reading a book where there was the story behind how Airbnb was created. And basically, there were students that they didn't have money for themselves. And there was a big conference happening in their city. So they decided to put air beds in the living room and try to rent it out to people coming to this conference. And from that crazy idea that how can we put someone that we don't know into an air bed, and that's the name Airbnb. And I found fantastic how just a simple idea that looks too crazy to be true became actually this huge industry.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And what I think is so interesting is that's the foundation that the industry was built on, and really the start and the introduction of it. But it has drastically changed in just the course, less than 20 years. We're 15 years into Airbnb being around, and it's gone from, like you said, an air mattress on the ground and a hot plate in the kitchen and a shared bathroom, to what you see today, which is really what we focus on, building these magnificent resort style properties. And I call it the amenities arms race. And it is basically, we started there with an air mattress on the ground, and where we are today is so much different. And where we're going, where the short-term rental industry will be in another 15 or 20 years is very different too. And in order to be successful as a property owner or an investor in this space, I think it's critical to, know where we've come from, but also see where we're going and keep ahead of the trends so that you don't get caught at the end of the line and with a property that's not producing and not booking.
That's good. We'll talk about where we're going with Airbnb, but let's get to educate our audience a little bit more on understanding the whole model and why it works so well. So if I would think, what's the advantage of the short-term rentals against a hotel, for example?
Yeah, I think that there's advantages for the guest and for the property owner, right? And so the advantages for the guest right out the bat is typically your own space. And so you are not walking down a hallway and walking into a room, and you do not have people all around you. You have your own unique experience that's separated from other properties. You also oftentimes have additional amenities. And so you might have a kitchen. Most properties have a kitchen in them. You have washer and dryers. You have your, maybe multiple bathrooms and multiple bedrooms if you're traveling with your family. And then you might have some outside space for your dog if you're traveling with your dog. And it really just gives you a completely different experience and stay when you have your own property versus staying at a hotel where all of the amenities like the laundry room or the hot tub and pool, those are all shared amenities between you and a bunch of strangers. And you don't typically have hotels that have multiple rooms, have kitchens, barbecues, things like that you would get when you're renting a short-term rental. And so that's the advantage for the guest. And then I think the advantage for the investor and a property owner is a much higher cash flow, top line revenue opportunity where you can make a lot more money on that property than you would if you just maybe traditionally rented it out as a long-term rental.
Okay, I have a question though. You said about sharing amenities, right? But here in Europe, we have actually a challenge with the short-term rentals because they occupy apartments, right? So the apartments that are being shared, so it's a residential building where there are long-term rentals there, and some apartments in this building are short-term rentals, so there are parties, and some cities are starting to go and creating rules that some locations cannot have short-term rentals. But basically, you are sharing the amenities. You are sharing still the same corridor. You're sharing the same space, maybe the laundry room, the same garden, just as a hotel. So why do you say that actually you have that advantage of having your own space?
Yeah, you're right. Thank you for calling me out on that. That's the difference between the short-term rental industry in the United States and the short-term rental industry in Europe, right?
Okay.
They're very, very different. And so in the United States, we see a very small percentage of those shared spaces, apartment buildings that are being used as short-term rentals. It's usually standalone properties. And I have stayed in 20 countries in Europe, always at short-term rentals. And so I know exactly what you're talking about firsthand. You're right. Most of the time it is an apartment building, and you do have similar accommodations to a hotel. And so you guys have maybe some different advantages. What I spoke about earlier was really an advantage to the United States market. What I saw firsthand in Europe in the advantages are a lot of times the location. Hotels are typically centralized in a certain part of the town that has a lot of hotels. And a lot of times you can get an Airbnb or a short-term rental that might be right next to the park or the church or the concert hall that you want to be at. And so you can get much closer to where you want to be through an Airbnb style booking. And then what I loved about Airbnbs in Europe is I always had a kitchen. I love to cook, and I could always find a great spot, buy a local market where I could go get fresh bread, fresh vegetables, and I could cook, breakfast in the morning for the family. And so that kitchen was really critical for, my great guest experience that I didn't get in many hotels. Mm-hmm. And then the location, I think you can get better locations with short-term rentals.
Cool. Good to know. I didn't know about that difference between the markets, actually. That's really interesting. And if we come to challenges that the investors will face, because you've been playing a role establishing over 500 STRs, right? Is that 500 STRs that you establish for your own business or that you help business to launch? How does it work?
Yeah, I wish I had 500 STRs. I've only got a couple, working my way to that 500 number, but no, that's a majority of those have been set up for other investors, and we've helped them set those properties up for success from day one. The challenges that investors face, you actually touched on it earlier. One, and the biggest one, is probably the regulations. And so you do have a property that maybe you set up in an apartment building or an HOA or even a city or municipality that you have a lot of success with and it's doing really well, but you end up with upset neighbors who say, I don't want this short-term rental in our apartment building. And they go to the board and the HOA committee and they change the rules, and you can no longer have that property as a short-term rental. And so those ever-changing regulations, I think, are the biggest potential pitfall that investors will find themselves, that they need to be cautious of and think about. And then the next one is guest management, right? You are opening up, even if you only have one unit, you have one small hotel unit, and you've got to be thinking about check-in, check-out, cleanings. Are items stolen? Are things going to be broken? Do I have a credit card on file? What if my guests don't check out on time and I have another guest coming? There's so many potential, situations you can run into when you're managing people and you're running a little hotel. You need to be cognizant of that and very much set yourself up for success in your mindset alone, to know that this is not a long-term passive investment. This is an active, it needs to be managed every day. I need employees and cleaners and team members and a bookkeeper, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. And so thinking about those two things, regulation and then managing of the property.
So it's not too different from managing a hotel in the end of the day, right? It's have all the complications we have with the hotels in the industry, just probably a little bit a different setting with a different offering of facilities. So what makes a very good short-term rental? What is that thing that makes that different and a special product?
I think that it all comes down to the design, the furnishing, the amenities, and the guest experience. And so if you plan on taking an apartment building and throwing we have IKEA here. That's the kind of the cheap furniture brand. and you plan on throwing an IKEA bed in there and just a very basic setup with nothing special and unique, you are going to have a very difficult time competing with the Marriott and the Hilton down the street, because they have density, they have a lot of marketing dollars, and your property is not different or special than theirs. The advantage that short-term rental property owners and hosts have is creating a unique experience. And so what can I do? You can see behind me, this is a property in Scottsdale, Arizona. Well, it's got a pool table, and it's got the local murals, and it's got neon signs, and it has Instagrammable moments, and it is a very unique, special space. And hotels can't compete with that, because what the product that I'm offering the market is so much different than what the hotels can offer. Because of my property, it has 4 bedrooms, not 1 bedroom. It has a kitchen. It is 1 minute away from the concert area that everyone wants to go to for all the local concerts. And so really creating a unique space, I think, gives you a distinct advantage. And I'm thinking about a property we did in Nashville, Tennessee. And if you're familiar with Nashville, Tennessee, it's very much a party town, a country music town, and there are a lot of bachelor parties that come into town. Well, we set up a condominium that is Taylor Swift and Pink themed. And so it is a cowgirl themed property, and it has the neon signs and the pink walls and the guitars, and it's so over the top and really unique and cool that when a group of ladies are traveling to Nashville and they're looking for a property, you can best believe that that's the property they're going to book over anything else, because they get the opportunity to have a really fun time in the property itself. And the home or the apartment actually becomes part of the vacation. And it's not just, I'm going to Prague to do this and this and this. It's, I'm going to Prague to stay in this property that's going to have, we're going to have a great time in that property, and also have a good time doing the things we came to town to do.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. My father and his partner have an Airbnb property down in Uruguay in a place called Punta del Diablo, a little beach called Punta del Diablo. And she is an artist, so she makes the rooms herself with her own hands. And she makes like little huts that resemble to like the Lord of the Rings, like, like hobbit houses. And the place that they eat is like an apple, like that you can have your breakfast. It's a massive apple that represents the day that she came here to visit us in Prague. So it's the metamorphosis of Franz Kafka, so everything has a little story. And it's awesome that with a short-term rental, but you can do probably with a hotel as well if you're passionate about enough. But with the short-term rentals, you can have all that flexibility. However, if you put so much energy, so much passion, how can you actually scale the business? Because a hotel, you build already thinking about multiple rooms so you can make that multiple sales. How can an STR actually scale their business and be really independent?
It's a very good question. It's a hard thing to do, and there are not many companies that have done it extremely successful. And so if you think about like the hotel owners, there are people that own tens of thousands of hotel rooms, and there are groups that own hundreds of thousands of hotel rooms. Well, the biggest groups I can think of own maybe a few hundred short-term rentals. And so a few things that can help you with scaling is, one is density. And so know a market really, really well and open multiple properties within that market. Even if you're just a few blocks away from each other, that gives your cleaners the opportunity to hit multiple locations in the same day. It allows you to really dial in your numbers and know how much these properties will rent for and kind of rinse and repeat. And then I would focus on quality over quantity. And so I would rather have a short-term rental that maybe makes $250,000 a year in revenue than have 3 or 4 short-term rentals that make $75,000 to $100,000, because my operating cost to manage 4 properties is much higher than managing 1. And so I just want to have the most kick-ass quality with the highest amount of revenue per property I have, and focus on optimizing each individual property to get the very most juice out of, squeeze it the most you can before you go buy another lemon. That would be my tips on being successful from that perspective.
That's cool. And if we get to talk more about the differences and the clashes between the hotel industry and STR. Is short-term rentals hospitality or is tourism?
I would say it's 100% hospitality. And I think that that has actually been the industry's kind of Achilles heel over the last couple of years, is that there are many investors who don't think of it as hospitality. They think of it as I'm renting out my property. No, you're in the hospitality industry and this is not a traditional rental. And so that probably mindset has given the industry a little bit of a bad name, and neighbors have been upset and guests have been upset because the property owners and the investors don't think they're in the hospitality industry, but they are 100% in the hospitality industry.
That's cool. Like, I have to say, like, I had probably 3 or 4 experiences with Airbnb, but more directly, I only used Airbnb for short-term rentals. And I had 2 very, very fantastic experiences, right? And the first one that was in Berlin, and the host, she was calling me before check-in to see where I was, like how far I was, so she could welcome me and show everything, show the facilities. It was just a room because Berlin was completely full. So she was renting only the room, she would be there, but she showed me and have a full introduction of the place and everything. So I felt that I wanted to hire her to work for us here in the hotels, right? Because she had that really hospitality DNA that I wasn't expecting. But I had some Airbnbs that really was like no communication, really bad, got there, was dirty, was really messy, tough to deal, and didn't have that great experience, and one that canceled me on the day as well. But I feel that these things that happen, right?
Yeah, they definitely happen. And what I do think is really cool about the industry and how it's evolving is like even Airbnb is starting to really reward those hosts that are putting hospitality first. And so like you have the super host status where you know that host does a great job and has always had good reviews and goes above and beyond for their guests. And then you've also got the guest favorites. So there are properties now on Airbnb that are guest favorites that they will bring to the top of the list that let you know, hey, other guests have had a great experience here as well. Mm-hmm. And so those platforms are rewarding good hosts, and then people that don't do a great job are kind of falling to the bottom of the list. And so we're starting to weed out some of those bad actors.
Nah, that's good. That's good. I want to see more of the good players. That's awesome. And we're getting now to the last part of our chat here, and we play a game in the Schulering Hub here. I don't know if you listened to our podcast before that, but since number 1, we always play a game to try to foresee the future. So we like to think in the next 10 years. The goal of this game is that if any one of our audience there is just listening and one day they need some inspiration for themselves, they can jump on any of our shows, find one subject that they are looking for, go to the last 10 minutes of the conversation and get some crazy ideas of what our guests are talking that will happen in the future.
It's a great question. So my prediction is the next decade, the very unique properties, the properties at the beach homes and the cabins in the mountains and the yurts and the tree houses, those really unique niche properties are going to be very successful. And I think that the hotel industry is going to kind of gobble up and get rid of and remove those other properties, the spare bedroom for rent, the small condo apartment in a condo building. I just don't think that that's a scalable and a good business model that will last for short-term rental operators. I think that they're going to really get crushed by the hotels. But I think those unique properties, those niche properties are going to do very, very well. And guests are actively looking for very cool places to go stay. And so I think there's going to be a big divide between hotels having all the bedrooms, small condos, and short-term rental Airbnbs having all the unique experiences.
That's an awesome prediction. I hope that hotels are also getting into more than experience part, but I see what you mean. It's getting like the product ready, just come, lay down, have your breakfast and go, staying with that 3-4 star type of style hotel. and the experiences being divided maybe by the luxurious experiences of the hotels or a more maybe affordable experiences with Airbnb. Is that what you mean by creating the unique experiences, or the experiences with Airbnb will actually be more expensive than a luxurious hotel?
That's a great question. I think that they will be comparable to a luxury hotel. And so I think that you will look at a luxury hotel and look at the suite that does have a kitchen and has maybe 2 bedrooms and a living room, and you will be able to compare it to your own individual property that has all those things but is not in a hotel building and is maybe designed and furnished and is a little bit more unique. I think that those 2 subsets will be very similarly priced, and I believe that people will gravitate more towards having their own space versus staying in a hotel if the price is similar.
Awesome, Mark. And Mark, so as we're here, we are getting to the end now, but please introduce STR Cribs and how you help investors to grow their business.
Yeah, so we're a design and renovation company focused only on short-term rentals. And so currently we're only in the United States. We do offer a virtual design service though, so we can help people anywhere across the world with some virtual designs. And really we're a consultation service. And so we're going to give you a playbook for what will take your property from where it is today to where it needs to be in order to be a great short-term rental. And that might be a kitchen remodel and replacing the floors and adding a hot tub and a barbecue. That could be, building a treehouse in the backyard with slides for kids and all kinds of cool stuff. We really take a unique approach to every property and try to give you a playbook and help you take that home or that space from where it currently sits to where it should be to be a kick-ass property. And just kind of circling back on what I talked about before. When you're running short-term rentals, it's not about having the most amount of properties. It's about having the highest quality properties. And so maybe you have a home that does $80,000 a year in revenue today. Well, can we make a couple of changes to that property to get you to $100,000 a year in revenue? And that's the kind of projects we take on, and we help people really optimize their property.
Also, Mike, and how can our audience get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'll give you my email. You could drop it in the show notes. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn. I know I connected with you this morning, but I'm posting every day. I've always got tips. I've always got ideas, themes, finished projects. I think that I've got one of the coolest LinkedIns out there. So follow me on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you very much for joining us. It was an awesome conversation, actually, very different than we would normally have. So thanks for your energy. I really enjoy it. And I appreciate I will put all your links with notes. Okay?
Cool. Thank you for having me on. It was great to chat with you.
That's with you. Schulering, thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye.